And if the lagoon were to rupture, there's nothing stopping it from flowing directly downhill from the cattle farm directly into this creek.
Nature is a living entity that our lives depend on, and it does not have rights. We view nature as property, and it's property to be owned by the owner, or in the case of Lake Erie, the state of Ohio claims to own it.
When the government is no longer meeting the needs of the people, they have an absolute right to abolish or change it. We are trying to encourage people to take power back locally.
The Lake Erie Bill of Rights said that Lake Erie has the right to exist, flourish, thrive, and regenerate.
Algae largely, historically, has been kept at bay and not perceived as much of a problem until the last 25 or 30 years, when something that's not particularly detectable to us is the gradual cycle of warming of the Great Lakes. Well, then you feed the algae with phosphorus, which we'll call manure or shit.
That is liquefied fermented cow waste being dumped directly onto the fields. And wow, no wonder the St. Joe River smells like cow shit.
The waterways that are in the nearby area that end up flowing into rivers, which flow into typically in our area, into the Maumee, and then end up into the Lake Erie.
The problem is that 20 years ago, there were probably a few dozen confined animal feeding operations in the Maumee Basin. Now there are hundreds, and as I'm saying, possibly close to 1,000.
Animals are enclosed inside buildings, especially hogs and poultry. It's almost entirely enclosed unit so that there's no natural sunlight even getting into the building. When you go to the grocery store and buy your eggs, I'm not sure if people really understand what the conditions are like.
They're doing something that is probably one of the most personal acts we have, and we're not allowed to even see how it's produced.
There's exploitation of the workers, there's exploitation of the animal, there's exploitation of the environment where these facilities are located.
This is chickens? Really? There's chickens here?
Yeah.
I haven't seen a chicken.
No.
What is this?
From what I've heard, there's like at least 4 million laying hens in there.
How much waste do 4 million chickens produce, do you think?
I really couldn't tell you.
Just trying to think about that. It's like, oh my God.
One truck after another filled full of shit.
Because I have a manure management plan and say, well, any manure that I apply to the land is going to be taken up by crops. It's not going to go down into the tile system, but it is happening. Whether they like it or not, it's happening.
Year-round, manure is being dumped on farm fields in amounts that the soil cannot assimilate, the bacteria cannot break down, and that is the genesis of the problem here in Lake Erie.
So let's start at the basics, what we need to survive. And it's clean water, it's clean food, clean air. So you have to live differently. And I think we could figure it out if we'd even understand collectively what the problem is. And that we do have the right to govern our communities, because that's a lot of what our work is about. It's about local self-governance. And who knows the ecosystem better than the people who live in the community?
It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. This is about our area right here, trying to save our water. You can never say that you are never going to run out of water. Water's sacred to me.
So what you have is the rights of nature being increasingly talked about and understood as a situation where local people protecting their local ecology or their environment are able, under a rights of nature kind of law, to protect Lake Erie as a living, evolving, flourishing being, allowed to not be poisoned, to not be impaired, to not be water diverted.
If we're going to actually change the system, we're going to have to go for what we want, not what we're allowed to do or what we think we can do. It's going to have to be a real shift in our thinking and our belief in our own power system and what we can do as people.